I want to talk today about politicians, the cabinet, the government, the people that are running our country, especially those kind of specialised cabinet roles. Maybe it's me being naive, maybe it's me being misguided, but I really think if people are doing a specific specialist role, they should be experienced and qualified in that area. You know, if someone's is the Secretary of Health, Secretary of Education, maybe they should have a bit of experience in health or education. Let's look at Boris Johnson, for example. This man is now the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs and Commonwealth Affairs, often known as the Foreign Secretary. The Secretary of State's remit includes relations with foreign countries, matters pertaining to the Commonwealth of Nations and overseas territories, in addition to the promotion of British interests abroad. The Foreign Secretary is also responsible for MI6 and GCHQ. So, let's have a look at what qualifies Boris to do this job. Well, he studied the classics at Oxford, and then later joined Parliament to become the Shadow Minister of the Arts. I can see the connection. Classics Oxford, Shadow Minister of the Arts. Then he became the Mayor of London, and now he's somehow qualified to deal with foreign affairs. He has, despite having no military background, no experience in diplomacy, and no experience in international relations. I don't know, let's have a look at someone else. Let's have a look at Jeremy Hunt, famous not only for his Cockney rhyming slang name, but also as the Secretary of Health. Secretary of Health, now he must have been like a doctor or a physician or maybe a hospital administrator or a nutritionist or a psychologist. He's probably worked in health, right? He is the Secretary for Health. But no, his background, well, he studied philosophy, economics and politics at Oxford, and then his work history includes teaching English in Japan. He started a failed business exporting marmalade to Japan, and then he started a PR firm before joining Parliament to be the Shadow Minister for the Disabled People, and then the Secretary of State for Culture, Olympics, Media and Sport. Where the jump from Culture, Olympics, Media and Sport to Secretary for Health, I don't see the connection. I really don't see how he can be qualified for one and the other. Justine Greening, the Secretary of State for Education. She must have worked in a school. Maybe she was a teacher. Maybe she was a head teacher. You know, surely she understands schools, children, pedagogy, especially as she's responsible for school improvements, teachers' pay, and even the school curriculum. No, Justine Greening studied economics and then went on to become an accountant for some major businesses, and then joined Parliament as the Economics Secretary to the Treasury. In fact, her only experience in education is that she went to school, which would seem to be enough considering we don't have a Secretary for Education in the last 100 years that ever worked in a school. In fact, the nearest we have is Herbert Fisher, who in 1908 taught history and later became Vice-Chancellor at the University of Sheffield until 1917 when he joined Parliament. Things don't look much better for other members of the Cabinet either. Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Michael Gove, has nothing in his educational work history that shows an interest in agriculture or the environment. Michael Fallon, Secretary of Defence, he graduated with a Master's of Arts and hasn't served in the military. Liam Fox, the Secretary of State for International Trade, studied medicine and was a GP before entering Parliament. The Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, Karen Brady, was a tax manager. Don't get me wrong, there are some cabinet members who are experienced and qualified to be working in their job. David Lidlington, for example, is the Secretary of State for Justice, and he has a PhD. The thesis was titled The Enforcement of the Penal Statutes at the Court of the Exchequer, circa 1558 to circa 1576. David Mundell, the Secretary of State for Scotland, is Scottish. Alan Cairns, the Secretary of State for Wales, is Welsh. And James Brokenshire, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, is, well, He's from Essex. Things aren't really any better with the opposition either. Labour's shadow cabinet has the likes of Nia Griffith, the Shadow Secretary of Defence. She speaks 5 languages and she's written books about language learning. However, how that's related to defence, I don't know. Angela Rayner, Shadow Secretary for Education, didn't even finish school, let alone work in one. And John Ashworth, the Shadow Secretary of Health, no experience of health. Don't get me wrong, working in the cabinet, working in the government must be a difficult job, but they're getting paid a lot of money to run these specific areas in our country. They're making decisions on behalf of hospitals, on behalf of schools, on behalf of the BBC and what we see on TV. These people are making decisions on how our country is run, and I call me naive, but I just think they should have some experience or some education or training in that job. If I wanted to go for a job interview, I would probably be asked at the interview, or even, I'd have to put it on the application, how my experience, how my qualifications relate to that job. Frankly, I think we've got enough politicians that all they know is politics, and I don't think it's helpful. Coming in, to be the Secretary of Health, when all you've got is a background in politics, would be like me trying to teach you a language having only read a book about the language. Maybe I want to teach French and I read a book about French. That doesn't help me speak French. It doesn't help me know how to teach French. We're all just lost. Nobody's winning. I want to see people working in Parliament that are specialised in those areas, that are experienced in those areas and can make informed decisions about how this country is run. I don't understand how the Secretary for Education can make decisions about how schools are run, about how the curriculum is created, when they have no experience on how children learn, on how people learn. These things are important if we want to build a better country. And frankly, we're not going to do that by having inexperienced, underqualified people in the cabinet that all they know is politics and economics. Now, we've seen that this is possible. We've seen people come from, an accountancy background to become the financial secretary to the treasurer. We've seen people come from being GPs. Liam Fox was a GP and now finds himself working as the Secretary for International Trade. Why not make him the Secretary for Health when he's clearly going to know more about the struggles of people when they're ill and they can't work, how mental health affects people and the struggles of that, how hospitals work, how nurses need to work and can work more efficiently. It's clearly possible that people can transition from industry to politics, so why are we not seeing that happening? I want to see a government making efficient, informed decisions for a better country.